Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new installment of Talking Marijuana. We are going to talk your ear off about marijuana today. Thanks for tuning in. We're your hosts. I'm Barry Kramer. I am the owner of California Patients Alliance. We are a GLACA-accredited dispensary here in the city of Los Angeles. If you're a patient, come by and visit us on Melrose. And I'm with...
Yami Bolaños. I'm also patient operator for Pure Life Alternative Wellness Center in Hollywood, behind Amoeba Records. And I'm the president and founder of the Greater Los Angeles Collectors Alliance, setting the standards for medical marijuana in Los Angeles since 2006. And with us in studio today...
For a rare appearance here in Los Angeles on the John Lovitz Vodcast studio, I'm Don Duncan, the California director of Americans for Safe Access.
And for those of you that don't know, Don is usually up in Sacramento lobbying for medical marijuana issues. And that's why it's always great to have you down
this week I'm
studio.
slacking. I'm just hanging out in L.A., being a movie star, you know.
We have a great show today. We have a wonderful guest. Peter Christ from LEAP will be joining us a little later.
Law Enforcement
Against Prohibition, an amazing organization. We've had... Diane Goldstein on from that organization before, and we're planning on having a nice chat with Peter today. We're going to talk today about the Treasury memo that came out from
new federal memo, right? Yeah.
From the administration. We're going to talk about patient-focused certification, a new program set out by ASA, and we're going to explore that a little bit today and let people know about it. We'll go over legislation statewide and nationally, what's going on. And there's been some other activity in the news that we'll chat about, movement in the South toward legalization.
My ancestral homeland moving towards
the Michigan Supreme Court has come down in favor of patients and won't allow bans in Michigan anymore. We're going to talk about that for a little bit. And one of our favorite topics here is the reclassification of marijuana, and that seems to have reared its head again, as it will, I think, more and more in the future.
The issue that won't die, right?
So let's dive right in and talk about this Treasury memo, because boy, that was some big news.
First of all, I'll preface this by saying I always want to cheer the incremental steps, the small steps towards progress in medical cannabis, because we don't get a lot of big ones. And so most of our listeners are probably aware that for the many years now, for several years, the federal government has intimidated banks and credit unions and credit card companies into dropping medical cannabis clients. So if you're a medical cannabis business or an organization, they won't let you have a bank account, they won't let you take credit cards. You just can't participate in the banking in the way that normal businesses and organizations do. And this whole issue sort of reached a boiling point when Colorado and Washington legalized marijuana, and businesses said, hey, we're legal businesses, we're paying taxes, we're obeying state law, and we can't have a credit card or bank account. First of all, that's very inconvenient and unfair, but it's also really unsafe. These businesses were forced to operate on a cash-only basis. Now imagine this, you're a business and you are just taking in cash every day, and you've got to stick it under your coat and skirt off somewhere to hide it, but not to the bank. You can't put it in the bank, because I used to work at a Radio Shack store, and we had to take the deposit out every night and drop it, but it was just a little bit of cash, and it went in a safe deposit, a night drop at the bank. Well, you can't do that. You stick it under your mattress, hide it in the trunk. They don't know. You just have all this cash. It's hard to pay your taxes. It's hard to pay your bills. So on one hand, the government's saying you must be legitimate if you're going to be in the medical cannabis business. And on the other hand, they're making it impossible to be transparent and legitimate. Well, finally, after years of complaining, Americans for Safe Access got into this debate back in 2010 when we encouraged congressmen to start a sign-on letter to change the policy. And ASA and other groups have been working on this ever since. And finally, last week on Friday, the U.S. Department of Treasury and the Department of Justice put out a memo saying that there will be certain guidance. They're going to give certain guidelines for banks and credit unions and credit card companies if they choose to work with medical marijuana businesses. This memo is not great, but this is actually an important stepping stone, because we're seeing cracks in the federal facade. It wasn't that long ago that the federal government didn't even acknowledge that medical cannabis existed. Sure. And now this is the second time in recent history that the federal government has put out a memo indicating some kind of path forward. In August of last year, they put out a new memo, the latest memo from the Department of Justice, specifying the criteria that they would look for to make you a low enforcement priority. They're not saying you're legal. They're not saying they're not going to bust you. They just said back in August, if you do these 8 things, and I won't rehash it now because we've been over this, but if you do those 8 things, you're going to be a low priority for enforcement. And primarily it has to do with having a state regulatory process in place that is effective and enforced properly. And so We have this DOJ memo from August of last year, and now just this last Friday, and here in February, we've got this Treasury memo. So I think that's progress. Now, I know it's not great. I know people complaining about the memo. Barry hates it, but
I'm just sitting here so quiet right now.
No, don't tell us.
I love that you look on the bright side because you make me look on the bad side as well when you do that, because all I see through this is more of the bullshit that the federal government has thrown at us. I've had
here's the visual aid, Barry: half full, half empty.
And half full is definitely a nicer way to look. And in my life, I tend to try to do that. But after 7 years of operating California Patients Alliance and going up against this bizarre governmental
purgatory that we're in.
These things from the federal government don't thrill me that much because, and they used to. 7 years ago, I would have been jumping up for joy and going, "We're going to win. This is great. We're on the path." And I still believe what you say. Better something than nothing. And these are cracks.
There are limits. I know it's limited.
Damn, and it's like showing the government a picture of a baseball and they're saying, we're not going to regulate football now. We're not going to regulate football now. We're not going to regulate football now. And in the meantime, all the baseball fans and the baseball people are suffering. That's a really weird way to
But it's
put
true,
it.
yeah.
Because the reality
I'm
of
glad,
it is
so I don't want to say anything, but
thanks,
yeah, that's
thanks. But this just heats me up. I've had in the last couple of days patients coming through my dispensary going, "Hey, great news! You read what's going on with the federal government. You're going to be able to bank. I'm going to be able to use a credit card at your place again."
Yeah.
And now I have to say to everybody, well, you didn't really read the article, because the details, where the devil always is that like you said, they're looking for states that have regulatory systems in place. California does not have a regulatory system in place. So this new memo from the government doesn't really affect us in any way, other than to maybe light a fire under our legislatures, which I would hope it would do.
We hope so.
And then the other obvious glaring thing that people just have not read in these articles, all they've read are the beautiful headlines, is that the banking community doesn't give a shit about a memo by the Justice Department or the Treasury, because there's nothing binding in a memo. It's just suggested practice. And that means that if they go out on a limb and lend to marijuana businesses, and the next guy that gets the position in the Treasury Department decides that he doesn't want to do this anymore, they can just take that away. The banking organizations want our Congress to do their job and change these laws, because they are obviously outdated and don't work.
I want that too.
Yes.
One thing I didn't realize until 2010 when we started working on this issue, because people don't think about how banks make money.
Right.
We think that we know they're making tons, but we don't think about it. They don't really make money off checking accounts. They make money off merchant service fees, off credit card fees, but that's not their primary income. They make money off making loans, and they won't loan money to our industry and to our movement.
Absolutely.
It's too risky, and they're just not going to get into it. And so one of the reasons they were so willing to drop these accounts is because they're pretty much worthless for them. It's not like that $3 or $4 or $10 or whatever you pay them monthly fees. It's chump change to a bank. And so many banks are not going to be persuaded by this memo, because they're going to look at all the extra paperwork and the oversight and the potential legal risk of taking these accounts and say, well, it's not worth it.
Well, and part of the memo indicates that the banks are going to be responsible for watching our industry.
There's a tremendous amount of paperwork.
A tremendous amount of paperwork and responsibility for people that are not in this industry at all. And so if the bank thinks that you've taken in too much money, they're going to notify the federal government. Well, that's a really ridiculous thing. In an industry that people don't understand at this point, there are large amounts of money that are being taken in. And if I were a bank officer, I'd say, whoa, where's that coming from?
Looking on the positive side, I foresee a moment in time where some banker, maybe a smaller bank or a regional bank, looks at this and says, here's a niche market we can service and charge really high fees for. It's the story of, you remember Peter Lewis in Progressive Insurance. He found a niche of people who were otherwise uninsurable and just charged them top dollar and got really rich. It's the same thing the banks can do now with medical cannabis, is they can say, oh, hey, you can have a bank account. The monthly fee is $350, and there's a quarterly auditing charge, and blah, blah, blah. And I realize that's terrible for us as consumers of those banking products. But at the same time, it's really important to have a bank account.
True. But
I
it
would
is just
imagine-
one more fee service coming
I
to
know.
our industry. It's
Of
like
course.
we're getting totally taxed.
That's this half-empty part. Okay.
Yeah, that's a half-empty
Thanks
part.
for the acknowledgement.
I would think that in Colorado, the first week they reportedly made $5 million. That's $5 million of cash floating around the entire
They
state.
said up to now they pay
Imagine-
$339
Yeah,
million in Colorado. Up to I read yesterday or the day before. So up to that day, $339 million.
Mostly cash.
Not banked.
Not banks, so nobody's paying taxes. Who in their right mind? Well, I mean, we
They
pay
should
all
be
our
paying
taxes,
taxes.
but if you don't have to report it or nobody's taking account of what you're bringing in,
Right.
the likelihood of you reporting the correct amount.
And
is,
let me
you know,
explain to our listeners: we don't have I don't have banking services here in the city of Los Angeles. Don't have a bank, but we do pay taxes. We pay all of our taxes, and not only do we pay them, we pay a fine for every tax we pay because the government will not accept money orders or cash for a payment. So the only thing they accept is a check. Well, we don't have a bank, so we can't get a check. So every time we send in a money order, we know that we're going to get a $500 bill from the government or somewhere upwards of $500. That is just a penalty because we paid it away.
For paying in a legal manner.
For paying in a legal manner, that is the only way we
Right.
can possibly pay our taxes and be tax-paying citizens and businesses. It is it's just the worst system ever, and it is. I'm glad we have a system that we can at least do it, and I can say I pay my taxes. Here's my documents, whether I'm paying extra or not. But
that's not fair. You shouldn't have to pay extra.
no, it's
so
not fair to our
ridiculous,
industry.
you know?
Our
It's a
industry is the
syntax
bottom
for
of the barrel,
everything, yeah.
and everybody's piling on. And I understand the rush to pile on because we're going to open up this illegal business into a legal business.
Sure.
But it should never have been illegal in the first place. I mean, we can just
You're
keep
right.
taking this argument back.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's not fair. But
And
it's,
then on the most
something.
important part of it is the safety factor, that it's not a safe situation
No,
to
it's
have that
not.
much cash flowing around, and I'm sure law enforcement feels that same
Of course,
way.
yeah.
And with that, I'd like to bring Peter on just to see how LEAP
Good segue, Barry.
is dealing with this new information as well. So our guest today is Peter Christ. He is from LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Peter, how you doing? You're coming up on our Skype window now.
Yep, good to be here. Nice to share this with you.
Oh, and thank you so much for sharing. Have you been hearing our discussion? Have you been?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
so
I only disagree with one of your panelists. I am not an incrementalist. I find that incrementalism allows bad things to continue to happen for a long time. If in 1960 or in 1863, instead of Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation, he had signed a law that
Right.
said that you cannot beat your slaves except between 2 and 4 on Fridays. You gotta give them 3 square meals a day, and they got to have a warm, dry place to sleep in. That would have made it better for the slaves, but it wouldn't have ended slavery. It only would allow slavery to continue longer because, hey, it ain't so bad anymore. All right?
Well, that's a fair argument, although most social change happens in small steps. So,
Yes, I understand that, and I accept the reality about it, but I
Right.
do not accept it personally as a process.
yeah, I agree with you, Peter. Absolutely, there's an acceptance that has to go because that is the world we live in. But
Remember, it was 100 years from the end of the Civil War to the Civil Rights Act.
100
That's true.
years,
years.
yeah.
In fact, three of my favorite things that I like to talk about, huge human rights violations. For 100 years as a free nation, we allowed people to own other people. Now,
unbelievable.
that was not, on a human rights level, that was absurd. And on an economic level, it was a stupid policy because people are too damn expensive to own. It's much more sensible for me to pay you for 40 hours than you figure out. So then we had this, and we replaced it with 100 years of segregation. We might have a cure for cancer today. Who knows what geniuses we lost by pushing people out to the fringe of society. And I always like to thank the women that are listening to the show today and on the panel for representing a group of people, women, who studied real hard and finally by 1920 became intelligent enough to vote. I think they deserve
Why, thank
As my
you.
lovely wife would say, we all know I'm being facetious. Well, she was about this. Women were always intelligent enough to vote, but we as a free nation, it took 150 years to get us men to understand that and to give women the right to vote. So we have done profoundly stupid things in this society for profoundly long periods of time.
Right.
And then we finally ended them. And this prohibition, and I'm not just talking about marijuana prohibition, or am I even talking about drug prohibition? I am talking about the prohibiting of consensual adult behavior. When you have activities between consenting adults that they choose to do with each other, they're not making anybody else do it, and they're not doing it to anybody else that doesn't want to do it. They're just doing it amongst themselves. When you make that activity illegal and turn it over to the armed criminal justice department to deal with, you instantly create crime in your society. And here's the big deal. If there's money connected with this activity, you create violence in your society. Because
Absolutely.
you were just discussing very much about the money aspect of this business, whether it's legal or illegal, there's money being transferred.
Absolutely.
And you cannot settle your money disputes in court. Where do you take them? To the street.
Yeah.
So I want to see this regulated and controlled marketplace across the board for all drugs and all consensual adult activity. To give you my background a little bit.
Well, you know what? We're gonna take a little break here, Peter, and then come back and find out what brings you to the position that you're in, sitting and talking about these things. We want to hear about that. So we also want to hear about what Leap's engaged in at the moment and what you're working on with your organization. So let's take a little break. We'll come back and we'll find out a little bit more about you, Peter.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
And we are back. Talking Marijuana, your hosts Barry and Yami and Don, and our guest today is Peter Christ from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP, and we were just about to find out your background, Mr. Christ. You don't look like the typical police officer. I was mentioning that before we went on air. You have a nice long ponytail in the back, and you're Mr. Libertarian. You don't sound like any police officer I've ever come up against, and I haven't come up against any police officers. I'm just bullshitting about that.
Oh, sure.
So where do you come from, and what brings you to LEAP, and what's LEAP doing?
Okay, well, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I worked for the town of Tonawanda Police Department.
Wow.
It's a suburb of the city of Buffalo. For any of you people out there, I retired as a captain in '89, and for any of you people out there wondering if I was in the town of police department and I was a captain, what did the other 4 officers do? Town of Tonawanda was a little bit bigger than about 85,000 residents. We sat on the north edge of the city of Buffalo, on the Canadian border on the Niagara River.
Oh, wow.
20 officer police department. How did I come to where I am now? Well, it started a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, young Skywalker.
My birth was a real shock to my family. And the reason I say that is I was born the end of May of 46, which means I was conceived at the end of August of 45. Both of my parents were 42 years old when I was born.
Oh, wow.
My brother and sister were 13, 14.
Wow.
You were an accident baby.
Why did you have me? And she would say, oh, we wanted another baby. I would ask my father, why did you have me? And he would say, hey, the war was over. Everybody which I think was much closer to the truth.
You're a war baby.
So in the late 50s, a television program came on. I was in my early teens, and the name of the program was The Untouchables.
Yeah.
And it was about Chicago, Al Capone, and Prohibition. Both of my parents were born in 1904. They were 16 years old when Prohibition started in 1920. And they were 29 years old and married, with my sister being born when it ended in 33. So I had two people I could discuss this with. What was it like? Because they lived in Buffalo, right on the Canadian border. I learned from these discussions that my grandfather's brother, my great uncle, my father's brother, I knew as being the ace mechanic who ran the garage for Seal Test Ice Cream and could fix anything. I find out in our discussions that between 1920 and 1933, my uncle Walter owned a boat. Need I go further?
No. He did a little business on that boat.
He used to take rides across that Niagara River and pick some stuff up to supplement his income.
Sure.
When Prohibition ended, my uncle didn't become a gangster and a thug and a street crime guy, because he was never that. He was an opportunist. Just like most of the people in the drug trade in America today who are not gangsters and thugs. Most of the people in the trade are opportunists. College students working their way to school, selling some booze, some drug on the side, whatever.
And nowadays, entrepreneurs
I
that
was asking my parents, why didn't it work? Why didn't Prohibition work? My mother, who was a wonderful Baptist lady, would say it didn't work because the people didn't support. Okay. I would ask my father, the fallen Catholic, why didn't it work? And he would say it didn't work because it was a stupid idea when they thought of it.
So your dad obviously had the brains in your family.
It wasn't. They both had brains, but in different areas. My mama was a church lady, and my father was more a street person. Okay? So I got a pretty rounded background. By the time I got fascinated in this issue, and both of my parents felt the same way. If I showed an interest in something, they would bring books for me to read. They would find stuff for me, as long as it wasn't evil, what I was interested in. As long as it was something good, they would support it. I'm a high school graduate, never went to college. I am not an academic. I fit into that world of structured education well. But I was reading about it. By the time I got to be about 2021, I realized that we had passed a constitutional amendment to enact alcohol prohibition. That kind of weakened my mother's argument, because that took a lot of support in order to amend the Constitution of the United States. So my father's argument looked better, and then I realized that he was right. It was just a stupid idea. And now you got to remember, we're talking about the early mid-'60s, all right? This is before Nixon kicked off the drug war, but we still had drug enforcement.
Right.
Back then, as the thing hanging behind me says, Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement was the name of the organization before it was the DEA. So that's my plaque for my 2-week course that I took from back in 71. So I realized that it was a stupid idea, and then I looked what we were doing with drugs, and I said the only thing that is different between this and alcohol prohibition is the thing that's being prohibited. Everything else is exactly the same.
Right.
The gangsterism, and then this is before I became a cop. Then I came to the conclusion that this policy was stupid. Now, at 22, I got the call to the police department. I got to understand one thing on why I became a cop. I became a cop because I wanted to save the world from all the evil people. No, that's not the reason I became a cop.
That was a good reason. Okay, I hope you have a better one.
At 17 years old, I remember standing in my parents' bathroom, looking in the mirror, and I made a promise to myself. And the promise was, you will not have to work past your 45th birthday.
Past your 45th birthday.
That was my goal in life, was to be retired before I was 45 years old. I didn't want to have to sell my time to other people in order to eat. I wanted to be able to be who I was.
Sure.
So at 17, I joined the Navy. I figured I'd do 20 years in the Navy, and then I'd have my retirement, I'd be fine. Then I was in the Navy the second day, and I decided I didn't want to work for those people. Not that it's a bad organization, but it wasn't a good fit for me. And I always mention at this point that I am a Vietnam era veteran, not a Vietnam War veteran. Because I had a couple friends of mine that didn't come back from that war. I had some other friends that came back messed up. And for me even to suggest that I went through that experience dishonors their pain and suffering. But I was in the service during that period. I got out of the service, moved back up to New York State. I had two choices. I could be a firefighter or a police officer. My father and my brother are ace mechanics. I can't make a doorknob work unless somebody shows me how. So firefighter was off the list. You got to understand buildings, construction. So police work is talking mostly. I was good at that. I started taking the exams, got on the job at 22. Before I took the oath, I had a little sit down with myself, and I said, everything you know about this drug policy stuff is theory. It's all stuff you've read, that you've never worked it, you don't know it from personal experience. Put all your old thinking on the back burner. You're going to take this job, go do the job. I went in, I took the oath, and by the time I was on the job, about 4 or 5 years, there was one thing that became very, very clear to me. And that was, there was only one aspect of our job that no matter how vigorously I or my brother and sister officers did the job, it didn't make any difference. And that was drug enforcement. We would have a series of burglaries in our town. One of our officers would grab a burglar, and for a while, not forever, but for a while, there wouldn't be any burglaries. And we would take credit for that. We would say, we took that bad person off of our community, we made it better. The only thing that changed when we made drug arrests was the faces of the people we arrested. The drugs, there was never a shortage. You know, in the late 1960s, they made a huge drug bust in New York City. In fact, this was such a big deal, this drug bust, that they made 2 movies on it. One was called The French Connection,
right,
and the other one was a little smaller movie called Panic in Needle Park, starred Al Pacino.
Yeah.
And that was about the shortage on the streets of heroin of New York because of this huge drug bust. You know how much heroin they seized in that bust?
No.
9 pounds.
Oh my God.
9 pounds of heroin. They made 2 movies. Now we seize this stuff by the ton.
I know.
And there's never a shortage on the streets.
That's pretty incredible
Wow.
perspective about that. Yeah.
We're just rediscovering heroin now because somebody with a famous name died of it.
Absolutely.
Not because it hasn't been there continuously. And I'll tell you one of my fears, and we're going back to the incremental stuff I talked about at the beginning. And this is a prediction I'm going to make, and I haven't made a prediction in decades.
Okay, so let's pay attention.
All right, here we go.
Before the end of this year, we are going to see marijuana enforcement in Washington and Colorado pick up. I'll tell you why. Because before the end of this year, they're going to move marijuana from Schedule 1 and either to Schedule 1 or 2. Which is going to make it legal in America, but only under the prescription drug program. And just like morphine, which is legal in America, but only under the prescription drug program, states cannot sell it without prescription. So you're going to see Washington and Colorado be in a bad bind here because they've gone to over-the-counter sales. You're going to see the marijuana question be settled because now medically it will be available, and that whole process will start into effect, just like we saw, and you'll see that change, I think. There was a pill that we had a huge prohibition argument about in this country 12, 13 years ago. The name of the pill, I'm going to give both names because I don't want to offend anybody. It's either the morning after pill or the baby killing pill, depend on the way you look at it. We argued back and forth whether that pill should be allowed to be sold in America. That was the prohibition argument.
Right.
We decided it should be allowed to be sold in America, but under the prescription drug program. So now in order to buy that pill, you had to get a prescription from a doctor. And then you could go buy the pill. You got attitude about prescriptions by that time. Anyways, about 4 years ago, seeing the pill of the prescription drug program, the federal government moved it to Schedule 4. Now you don't need a prescription anymore. you have to do is have proof of age, and you can buy the pill over the counter. So the incrementalism is good because we couldn't have made that incremental step that we just did. We had to settle the prohibition argument a long time ago, but here is the problem. If we do that with marijuana before the end of this year, like I predict, at the next DPA conference I go to, about half the people that were there last year aren't going to be there this year because marijuana is going to be on the road to being legal. And we're going to have to regenerate the discussion and make people realize that the crime and violence was never really about the marijuana trade. It was about the cocaine trade, about the heroin trade, and that's still going to be in existence.
Right.
And then we're going to wait about 4 years, and the discussion's going to wall, and then we're going to hear people saying, wait a minute, you said if we legalize this stuff, the violence would go away. But we still got the shootouts, we still got the... And then we're going to have to get back into the discussion again about why prohibition is not what you do in a free society. Right. There's a legal term in Latin, and it says mala per se, mala prohibitum. And it talks about the two different types of crimes we have in society. Mala per se crimes are crimes because they are crime. If you and I are walking down the street and we see someone walk up behind somebody else and punch them to the back of the head, knock them to the ground, take stuff from them and run away, I don't have to explain to anybody why that's against the law.
Right.
If we, on the other end, walk down to another corner and see some guy walk up to another guy and smile and hand him some money, and the other guy hands him a package, and they both smile at each other and walk away, and I tell you that's against the law, I got some splaining to do.
Peter, how now? I understand all that you've said, and then how do you square that with the reality of there is no other path forward? We only go incrementally. I mean, this is my struggle too, is that the common sense seems to be pretty apparent, but common sense is not a word that government seems to understand or care about. So I'll tell you what, we're gonna take a little break because we're at that time again. Mm-hmm. Let's come back. I'd love to hear your answer to that question and just in how you see this progressing. And then we'll talk to you a little bit more about LEAP. So we're going to take a little break here just for a sec.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Talking Marijuana with Barry and Yami and Don, and our guest, Peter Christ from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP. And Peter, that was just an awesome history and a great way to sort of put everything in perspective. But earlier in our discussion, we had said, you know, as much as we don't like being incrementalists, there is a reality to how government functions and how we have to go forward. So, with your prediction of this coming up in this next year, how do you see it playing out? Basically, we're just going to continue incrementally. I would imagine.
Well, in fact we have. I mentioned slavery, which is a human rights violation. We corrected. I mentioned segregation. We corrected that one. Women's rights. We are on the road to correcting that one. Okay. Let me give you a couple other quick ones. In 1960, it was illegal to be gay in every state but Illinois. We're correcting that one.
I grew up in Illinois, and I'm not gay, but it's awesome that we were that way.
Well, it's funny you should mention that.
1957, 24 states, it was illegal for people of color to male melanin deficient people, okay, like us, okay? Wow. It was against the law to do that. We have used a good friend of mine is an addiction psychiatrist up here in Syracuse, and he said to me many, many years ago, you know what the problem with this country is? The Puritans. He said when they got kicked out of England, if they had gone east, they would have landed on the shores of Belgium or France, and they would have been told, make peace with your morality or stay on the boat.
Yeah.
Instead, they got kicked out of England. They went west. Nobody was warned that they were coming. And when they got here, what's the first thing they built? Schools of higher learning? No. Pillory, donkey stools, punishment to get performance, no whistling on Sunday, all those kind of laws. We've been chipping away at that history for a couple centuries now in this country. And this drug policy, this prohibition policy dealing with these problems with a police force is wrong. Morality is something that should be dealt with by family, church, education, and the healthcare system. It should not ever be the hand of the criminal justice system. And I know some people who are listening probably have a little hesitant with that and say, whoa, wait a minute, what do you mean? And here's the problem. If you are going to have your police in your community enforcing morality, there is a question you have to ask yourself first, and that is, whose morality are we going to enforce? An interpretation of morality. Christianity has many different interpretations of reality, depending on which church you talk to. Jews have a different interpretation. Buddhists have it. Hindus have it. All these groups have, which one are we going to make by law the one that everybody lives by? And I think there's a thing called the First Amendment that says we shouldn't do that. Make laws respecting religion.
Right.
Okay? And we have to get law enforcement out of the morality business, because here's the thing. When it comes to morality, people don't like to talk to us. 20 years of police work, not once did I have somebody walk up to me and say, officer, that man sold me drugs. Never happened. Okay? I would arrest them, and they'd be on the way to jail. Where did you get drugs? And they would say, I found them. Because they bought them in trouble if they were going. These type of laws.
We're losing your audio here, Peter, for a minute. I'm not sure why, but you're breaking up. Maybe a more consistent position. I don't know if it's because you're rocking back and forth.
I understand that. Is this better?
Yes. Yeah, that is better. Where do you see LEAP's role in this? What is LEAP doing to combat that kind of mentality in our government?
Well, first off, we are presenting an organization that presents people that cannot be dismissed.
That's true.
I had the idea for this organization back in the 90s when I first retired, and I would talk about the idea I had this law enforcement group to speak out against this drug policy and about prohibition in general. And people would say to me, gee, it's a great idea, you ought to do it. And I would say, I'm not the guy to run it. In 99, I met a guy by the name of Jack Cole, a retired New Jersey State Trooper. He came on board with an organization I was in called Reconsider Reform on Drug Policy at the time. Through the 90s, he became another speaker with me. And then in 2001, I want to thank an organization, by the way, an organization called MPP, Marijuana Policy Project, threw $50,000 out on the table and said, anybody who wants to start a law enforcement group,
wow,
some money. So Jack calls me up on the phone and he says,
there's some money out there.
From MPP. And I said, yeah. He said, well, you've been talking about it. Do you want to do it? And I said, do you want to run it? And he paused for a couple seconds and he said, yeah, I'll run it.
Awesome.
I said, do you want to run it? And he said, yeah, I'll run it. I said, do you want to run it? And he said, yeah, I already said, so I'll run it. I said, well, 6 months from now, when you're whining to me about how much work it is, I could remind you I gave you 3 chances. So the way I like to tell the history of LEAP is Peter Christ, had the idea for LEAP. And if it hadn't have been for Jack Cole, it would still be an idea.
Well, that's awesome. And you guys do such amazing work. And you're right, there is no more credible voice than the people that were walking the beats and on the streets and seeing it firsthand how prohibition is not the answer to the drug problem, and that smart policy is the answer. And smart policy comes from education. And you guys are doing a great job at putting that education out there.
I always told people that the idea for LEAP came from Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But when they spoke, whether you agreed with their conclusion about the war or not, nobody had the audacity to look at them and say, you don't understand the problem. Because they fought the war together. And nobody has ever said those words to me. You don't understand. No, whether they agree with me or not, realize that I'm speaking from within. Anybody can become a member of LEAP, but in order to be a speaker for LEAP, you have to be from law enforcement. And you were saying about what we're doing. We just became recognized as an NGO.
Oh, fantastic.
United Nations. And we are in the process now of writing up and suggesting a change, a vast change to the UN drug policy.
Oh, that's great.
And we are in that door doing that, and we have that credibility. We are an international organization. We have members in, one of our board members used to work with MI5 over in England. She lives over in Europe now. Another one's a former judge, Maria Cassan from Brazil. So we have a working cop up in Vancouver, BC. We have always been international in an organization because we are looking at it from our profession. We are looking at it that we are asked to go out into the community and do a job. And we are coming back from that job and saying, there's one aspect of this job that no matter what we do, it's not accomplishable.
Right.
It can't be done. And we're telling you, don't be wasting our time and energy doing this. Let us focus on the crimes that have victims connected to it, where people that are being harmed. Let us spend our time on that. Absolutely. We have created, I have many things to say about that, but the first one I want to say is this. We have created the largest prison population on the planet Earth.
Yes.
We incarcerate more people in our prison system than any other nation on the planet Earth. We have one of the most efficient prison systems on the planet Earth. If you want to judge efficiency on the fact is we put you in and you don't come out until we unlock the door, we're very efficient on that level. Roughly 1/3 of those people in that prison system are in there for non-violent drug offenses. That's costing us roughly $50,000 per head per year, and you're talking about almost 1 million people.
That's amazing.
Okay? And one last thing. In that huge, efficient prison system, would anybody like to guess how many drug-free prisons we have?
Zero. I'll guess. I watch TV. I see what's going on. I see movies. There isn't a prison around that doesn't have guards or other people.
I mention that because every listener that's listening to this show, the next time you're driving around your neighborhood and you drive by the local school and you see that sign that says drug-free school, I want you to remember we do not have one drug-free prison in this country, and the difference between the people in that school and the people in the prison is the people in that school have all their liberties and the people in the prison have none, and we can't keep drugs out of prison. Yeah. So let's get realistic about this. Realize that as the drug czar just said, as every drug czar before him has said, this is fundamentally a healthcare and an educational problem. Mm-hmm. When he said that in front of a bunch of reporters, I screamed at the television set because now one reporter asked the question that I thought that was screaming to be asked, and that is, Mr. Drug Czar, what other healthcare and educational problem should we spend 90% of our money on the criminal justice system to deal with?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good question.
That is really amazing, Peter. That is so concise and so to the point. For years, I've had discussions with people. I know my colleagues have had discussions with people about this this just lopsided way of going about prohibition. It just doesn't make sense in our country, and the more it doesn't make sense, the more it's held on to by our proud elected officials. It's a conundrum that I I am very upset in my personal life about. I don't know.
But thank God there's
how you get
LEAP
over
and,
that.
and all the officers that are involved. Diane Waddles Goldstein here in California that we know so well. We love her. She's so informative. She's such a great person to have on the show, as you are today. You know, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for being part of LEAP. It's such an important organization. You know, you guys are seeing things the way they're supposed to be seen. You know, it's clear,
Is there
transparent.
support that you ask for from the general public? Is there a website that people can go to and help your cause or find out more about LEAP? What would that website
Absolutely.
be?
There's leap.cc. LEAP was taken in every other category, so .cc. We also got copsaylegalizedrugs.com, takes you to the same website. If you Google the word LEAP, we're the second or first thing that pops up.
All right. So
We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which tells you two things about us. One is the government knows about us. And two, if you donate money to us, it's tax deductible. Okay?
Great.
None of our speakers are paid.
all
We all
voluntary.
do
We can
volunteer.
attest to that here. We're definitely not paying Peter for his appearance.
We do, when we travel, we pay expenses if there's expenses. So
Of
it
course.
doesn't cost our speakers anything to go out on the road. And we do have paid staff that books them and so on and so forth.
And that's what the support of your organization helps to support, is the structure to allow you guys to go out and do your speaking.
Absolutely. In fact, it was funny. I was at a presentation one time, and any questions, a guy stands up at the end and he says at a Rotary Club, well, it's obvious they sent their best salesman. I said, I'm not the best salesman. He said, who's your best salesman? I said, the guy that booked this event. He made a cold call to this Rotary Club and got me in here. I'm in here to do the close.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and if we don't have that sales force out there booking us, then we don't appear here or anyplace else. That's how.
Well, that was our impetus in making sure that we hear from LEAP on
least
a
once a
consistent
month,
level, because we think the work that you do is so important, and
The
you
drug
are.
issue of the whole concept of consensual activity. I'd like to recommend a read too, if you would let me at the end here.
Absolutely, go for it.
There's a book out there entitled "Ain't Nobody's Business If You Do." The subtitle is "The Absurdity of Consensual Crime in a Free Society," and the author's name is Peter McWilliams.
Oh yeah, we know Peter.
Yes,
quite well.
that is actually a great book. I've read it, and I second the motion.
Yeah. In fact, I've often said I'll never write a book because I'm not a writer. But after I read Peter McWilliams, I realized I'll never write a book because it's already been written.
I think I'm correct in saying that Peter died in prison.
Oh, yeah. He was a victim of the drug war.
Yes,
He died in prison without access
he died-
to his medicine.
No, it's actually more tragic than that. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, he died at home. He was put on probation because he wasn't allowed to grow marijuana. He was an AIDS patient. He used marijuana to suppress his nausea and stuff like that. They put him on a twice a week or something like that check that they would come out and check him at his home to make sure he wasn't using and do a urine test. And the one day when they came out to check him, they found him dead on his bathroom floor, drowned in his own vomit.
Oh.
So, in fact, the drug laws killed him. If the
And he's not the only
nausea would have
victim.
been suppressed by the marijuana was taken away, and that's what killed him. But to me, it is the most concise reading. In fact, one of the interesting things, a lot of people out there.
Peter, we're gonna need to cut in for that, station identification thing that we do. So, if you would hang with us for just a little bit, we'll come back. When we come back, we're gonna be talking about other legislation that's going on around the country and about ASA's patient-focused certification program, and we'll just tap with you in this point that you want to make when we get back. So we'll take a little break here.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hey there, welcome back for our final segment here on Talking Marijuana. We're with Peter Christ of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And Peter, we know you need to leave, but you were making a point before we took a break, and I'd like you to be able to finish that point.
Yeah, the title of the book is Ain't Nobody's Business If You Do. The subtitle is The Absurdity of Consensual Crime in a Free Society. And I up one side and down the other, thank Peter McWilliams for that subtitle. Because what he did is took the term that I used to use out of my vocabulary and replaced it. Because I used to call these victimless crimes. And I'm sure all of you have used that term. Yeah. And when you say it to people, you get such a list of imaginary victims, it knocks your socks off. He changed that term to consensual crime, activities between consensual adults. There's no debate about that.
Right.
There's no victimless debate about that. And I want to thank him, besides for the whole book, for even just for that. I want to thank you all very much. As I said, leap.cc, copsaylegalizedrugs.com. I want to thank you all for sharing your audience with me. You're the one doing me a favor. I'm just sitting here alone in the woods if you don't call me in here.
Well, we're just blank space if we don't have you on here, so we need you. We do each other a good service. And thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you,
we
Peter.
look forward to having you back on again
Thank
and
you,
finding out
John.
more about what you're doing. Thanks so much.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What a great guy, and what a great
I know,
organization.
what a great
They
organization.
just really
Good stuff.
are people that are needed. It's like where's the common sense in this discussion?
They're the common
There's
sense.
the common
They're
sense.
the common
People
sense.
that actually have to deal with these problems.
Right.
So, you were mentioning earlier that ACE has got a new patient program coming up, and we're always concerned about patients and how they can gain the most out of
Right. Well, and you know, speaking of incremental change, which I guess is a theme from this broadcast, you know, the medical cannabis movement and industry is evolving. It's becoming mainstream. Medical cannabis is sort of leaving the shadows. It's coming into the daylight, and there's a big call to regulate and enforce regulations in the industry, and it's complicated on how to do that because the government doesn't know how to do it, and local governments and state governments don't always want to do it, as we can see, for instance, here in California. And when they do it, they sometimes do it badly, as we've seen in, say, Washington, in the state of Washington, where the regulations
now,
are just
Boston is
disaster.
having a crazy time.
Boston's
it's
struggling.
Just horrible.
I have high hopes for Boston, but here's
Horrible
what.
regulations and how to go about it.
Over 10 years, we've been talking to people in the industry and the movement, and they've been saying to us, can't there be some standards, something that we bring to the table as a community and as a movement and as an industry that we bring to the table for best practices and regulation? And our answer to this, that was many years in the making, is patient-focused certification. And you can look that up at patientfocusedcertification.org or on our website at americansforsafeaccess.org. And basically, it's a third-party verification program that's going to deal with cultivation, processing, packaging and labeling, distribution, and testing of medical cannabis. And we're looking outside of the cannabis industry to the professionals who already regulate herbal products and herbal medicine for the standards, people like the American Herbal Products Association and the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are already standards for cultivating, packaging, and distributing echinacea, St. John's wort, and many other kinds of herbal medicines and herbal products. And so we're bringing those now to the medical cannabis industry, and I'm really excited about it this week because tomorrow we're doing our first certification audit. The program involves an application process and then an on-site visit. We're sending 2 PhDs out to a dispensary in Berkeley, the Berkeley Patients Group, tomorrow to certify the facility is compliant. Once it's certified, they'll be able to use that logo as part of their marketing and their outreach, both to regulators and to patients and to the media.
Like good housekeeping.
Like a good housekeeping seal, yes.
Yeah.
It also has a surprise audit every year. There'll be an unannounced visit from our auditors to just show up and check out and make sure they're doing as they say. And of course, part of this auditing process is to make sure they're obeying all the local, state, and federal regulations, but also they're upholding the operational standards, testing standards that go with being a safe, professional professional business. We're doing our second facility in San Francisco, a facility called Spark, S-P-A-R-C, in San Francisco on Thursday. So it's a big week for the program. We're really excited, and the feedback from regulators across the country about this is really exciting. I just got back from Boston, as a matter of fact, and Chicago to talk with regulators about this. We're talking to people in Oregon about it, where they're looking to write this into their guidelines, and I hope somebody in California will listen as well. So we're going to put a big push in this because it's time for medical cannabis to go mainstream and to sort of grow up a bit and do things like other industries do. So
And
we're
as
really
hard as
excited
that might
about it.
be for some of the people working in medical cannabis to conform from a Wild West sort of way of operating to a regulated way of operating, regulation brings the safety not only to the
Permanence.
patients.
It brings
Right.
permanence
It
too.
absolutely does.
People sometimes I hear people in say Los Angeles, in California, say, "Oh, we don't want the regulations because we've got it good right now." But look at the back and forth, the enforcement,
horrible.
the sweeps, the closing, the opening, the economic.
We've lived in a gray area since we've been
too many
open.
years.
Now
yeah.
let's look upstate in California. Let's look up at Oakland or Berkeley or San Francisco, where the program is solid. In fact, this week there was a story in the San Francisco
Yep.
Weekly that
Boring.
talked about the boring success of the San Francisco program because there are no more complaints, there's no more controversy. It's regulated and it's
it works.
permanent. If you're a patient in San Francisco, you're not wondering if your coroner dispensary will be there tomorrow. Of course it will. That's what we'd like to bring to this industry is permanent. So patients know that my facility is professional, my facility is safe, and my facility is going to be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. So they know they have access to their medicine. So I'm really excited about it, and I would encourage our listeners to go to patientfocusedcertification.org because we want you to know about it, even if you're not operating a facility, because patients should be demanding this. They should be demanding that the facilities that grow their medicine, provide it, package it, or test it meet professional standards. And that's what this is about, is meeting those standards for the patients.
In listening to you and Peter today, both organizations really trying to advance the real problems, the common sense, the things that affect many people, not leaving them out in the cold. It strikes me that, as we move into our government agencies, and this is the problem that's going on in Boston right now, is that they've legalized medical marijuana, and they were going to give out 20 licenses. And what we're finding now is that the corruption inside of the government, who's now in charge of overseeing this issue and implementing it, they're giving their licenses to this people that had money allegedly, but this has gone on everywhere that it's become legal. So you fight all your battles, you do all this incredible work that ASA and LEAP and other organizations, MPP, all have been doing, and then you get to the point where the ignorant people come in and say, okay, how do we legislate this? We legislate it by keeping my pockets full.
Well,
Exactly.
This happens in government, but let me point out there are examples
Happens
of
in
good
government a lot.
implementation. Colorado has done a pretty darn good job of implementing.
So far, so good. Really.
And also, I want to point out some cities and counties around the state of California have done a pretty good job too. And the city of Palm Springs just popped into my mind because in Palm Springs, it's a very conservative county. It's out in the desert, what we call the Inland Empire out there. I believe it's in Riverside County. It's very conservative. But Palm Springs is a little island of tolerance. They've done a really good job implementing medical cannabis, and I feel like they were transparent and what have you. So we just need to insist on that as voters. We have
How
to
about Los
insist on good
Angeles? How have
government.
they been?
Los Angeles a little less, terrible. And Los Angeles terrible.
They get the losers
I'm
out.
trying to find the half full
Oh,
comment
no.
there. I couldn't
There
find
is
it.
no
Terrible.
half full, half empty.
Think about it all the time.
It's
I mean, we live in Los
clusterfuck.
Angeles.
We're broadcasting here from Los Angeles.
Yeah, we're
We've all been
broadcasting from Los Angeles.
stuck in the mire here for
The unbelievable
10 years.
situation of a city passing a law, costing the people that
$1.5 million
advocated for that law over $1.5 million in time and effort, and for that law to not be implemented, and once again, after 7-8 years of ignoring every landmark place where the city could have stopped the growth, because they're not implementing, we have more growth in the city of Los Angeles.
And some of our listeners are thinking, great, more growth. The problem with that more growth is that it's
unregulated.
fueling a fire in the city against medical cannabis.
Exactly.
We started off with a city council that really wanted to regulate and make safe access permanent in the city.
Yeah.
And they did a 180 when the thing blew up and got out of control. They all turned around and became our enemies. And in fact, every member of the city council, including our champions, voted to ban medical marijuana.
Exactly. It was
So
unanimous.
If people think, there was a big debate in Los Angeles between one group of operators who wanted to sell cannabis and another group that wanted to sell cannabis. There wasn't. There was a debate about, are we going to ban it outright, no safe access
Which
in the
they
city,
tried.
or are we going to do something plausible to save access for the patients? So I'm proud of what we accomplished here, but the cautionary tale I see for the rest of the country is this. When you're dealing with medical cannabis, act early. There's no sense in delaying and stalling for years. And be consistent. Do what you say you're going to do, because there are plenty of people who will take advantage
If
of
you
a
don't
of
do
a
what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. So,
Entrepreneurs.
anyway, I don't want to get off on a tangent.
No, and we didn't want to get up.
It's
Los
on our
Angeles
minds.
here, we do
No,
it quite
we
a bit,
do it
but
a lot,
it's certainly frustrating. And in light of all the progress that gets made all around the country, to be the only city and one of the largest cities in our country that our government, our elected officials just ignore this question. They are too, I would say, cowardly to deal with it. No one wants to step into the ring.
Exactly.
And over 1,000 dispensaries in Los Angeles. There's no other city in the country that can boast the ridiculousness of that situation. And
Or they
I'm
can
all for
boast-
free market, but free market is still regulated.
We passed
We're
a
not
law.
regulated.
Yeah, we're not.
It's not a free market that's happening in Los
No,
Angeles.
not
People
at
say,
all.
"Oh, let
It's
the
a-
market rule." What's happening is a economic situation that exists in the shadow of prohibition. And so when people say, "Oh, the medical cannabis free market," no, this is the weird, bizarre, corrupted market that happens when you've got an unregulated black market that's operating in tandem with a market that's trying to be legitimate. And so what's happening are not market forces. What's happening
pretty
is
crazy.
the manipulation of market forces.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. When I close my store at 8 p.m. because it says that you can only be open from 10 to 8, and I drive 5 miles to my home, which used to be a block and a half away from my business, and on my way the 5 miles, there's one dispensary after another that are still open, that are open till midnight.
Guaranteed they're not paying their taxes.
And they're not paying their taxes. But I'm going home looking at all this on my way home because I'm
it's
obeying
crazy.
the law.
So I know
crazy.
we're going to run out of time, so maybe we want to jump
wanted to go
quickly
on-
to Sacramento. if we may,
you
on
guys.
Los Angeles.
Don
Yami and I.
and Yami were in Sacramento this week.
We had a great time in Sacramento. We visited probably a dozen offices,
Or
maybe
more,
15.
maybe like 18,
a
yeah.
lot of them. It's hard to remember. We spent 2 days going door to door. It was really wonderful. We were there to talk about the organ transplant bill, and we're gonna talk a lot more about this on later episodes. So look for that. What people don't realize that while Proposition 215 in California protects you from criminal prosecution, it doesn't give you any civil protection.
Right.
And medical cannabis patients are routinely denied organ transplants that they need to stay alive if they test positive for legal medical cannabis use. And this is not just California, it happens around the country. This is a big problem. And so we're trying to pass a bill in California that will allow organ transplant patients to get their organ transplants they need without that being a factor in the final decision. It's not something crazy. It's already illegal in California to deny an organ transplant based on mental or physical disability. And so we want to expand that list and say mental disability, physical disability, or medical cannabis use. And this is very important for Yami, of course, on a very personal level.
Yes. My warranty is getting ready to run out, as Don says so often. I've been transplanted 18 years.
She takes a licking and keeps on kicking.
That's
Let me tell you.
They told me 25, so I'm nearing my warranty, and we really need to get this passed. This is very important. There's people that have died in Los Angeles waiting for a liver transplant. They weren't given because of their medical marijuana use. So we need to pass it. It's a no-brainer. We went up there and asked a lot of elected officials would they author it, and a lot of people offered to co-author it.
But not author it, right?
No one wants to author it. So we're still pushing. We have till Friday.
Barry was talking about the corruption and the implementation of these
Yes.
laws, and there's a lot of politics and posturing that happens in Sacramento and in every state capital.
Sure.
And you would think you would go to someone and say, this woman is going to die if this law doesn't pass, and they'd be like, oh my God, let's get this done. But it's not so straightforward.
No, they just look at me and go, oh, yes, this
Well, it's
must worked
reflective of
on.
our
They
state
kept telling us,
legislature. It's
"Oh, we-
17 years and we don't have
They
regulations.
said,
for
oh, we
medical
feel
marijuana.
for you. We agree with this. You're so right about it, but no, we can't.
We'll
help
co-author.
it. So we're still
And
working.
again,
We
like
have 4 days
a
to
larger
get this bill
vision
introduced.
of a larger vision of what's going on with our city council. Everybody a little too cowardly to step in the ring and claim
Exactly.
that this needs to move forward. We have that in our state legislature as well. It's politics and maneuvering and cowardness that will not allow these people to get on the. We're 17 years into our medical
I
marijuana
know.
program, and we don't have laws that govern our medical marijuana program. It's
We
absolutely
could go on and on. I
ridiculous.
see we're running out of time, but I could just vent on this for a
We're
long
running
time.
out of time. We
For
would
hours at a
love to
time.
thank Peter Christ one more time for coming on our show today, and the organization LEAP. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Pura vida.
Pura
Pura
vida.
vida.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey, everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.